Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. At the end of my Was It Any Good Though series, I came to a conclusion that I suspected would be the case, but wouldn't have truly known until I'd looked at each class in the level of detail that I did. And that is that every class can be considered good, and while some are more favoured, there is really no class that is just straight up bad or useless. Each class has their own unique identity and iconic spells. Not everyone needs to have a CC, not everyone needs to have an interrupt or even a DPS cooldown, and while some classes can do things others cannot, it's often also the case vice versa. So in this new series, I want to look at the ways you can make the most out of your chosen class and find out how to play to your class's strengths. The points I'll be looking at will differ from class to class in relation to their strengths, as they are not shared across the board. Today I'll be looking at the Mage and we'll cover these points: leveling choices, their PvE power, gold farming, PvP, utility, and macros, and finally some add-ons. If you were watching me back in the day before Classic released, you may remember back in the Priest Was It Any Good Though video, I ended by saying if I were going to do a class tier list, I would put Priest at number 1 with Mage close behind. Now we're a good few months into Classic here and I've been able to play alongside many excellent mages in PvP and PvP and see exactly what they're capable of, so it's time for a little revision of that previous statement. Mages are the best class in the game by such an enormous margin, it's actually crazy. Mages play like a class from the end of TBC or the start of Wrath of the Lich King that's time travelled back to Classic. They're so much more complete and refined and frankly just lack the rough edges that other classes do. In fact, you can summarise the issues mages have by saying you're going to be spending a huge amount of time on your behind downing loads of water. Still, at least that water is free for you, unlike everyone else. In fact, just looking over a few sites that pull information from Warcraft logs, you can see just how popular mages are overall, and for good reason. Anyway, this is going to be a long one, so let's get into it. Leveling. Mages are truly unique when it comes to leveling. I bet everyone remembers Joker's legendary run to 60, which is no doubt going to go down something that's going to be remembered for a long time in WoW. In fact, many people are still attempting something similar with AoE grinding, but without layering, especially on PvP servers in busy areas, it can be more difficult. It certainly seems competitive if anything is to be taken from how many people are still opting into level this way, but I think it's really subjective. Some people can't stand grinding in one area, and I'm that kind of person by the way. Getting started on AoE leveling doesn't really have to significantly impact your leveling build either. All it takes is some points into improved Blizzard, which can be done as early as the late level 20s, and you're pretty much ready to go. The basics of it are very simple. Mana barrier or ice barrier, gather the mobs up, frost nova, create distance, and then blizzard them down. There are some things that can mess you up if you want to give this a go. First of all, if you have the frostbite talent, don't have ice armor up, it can proc off this and it will separate mobs out easily. The slow from Cone of Cold will not overlap rank 3 improved Blizzard slow, so don't count on Cone if improved Blizzard only has 1 second left. Finally, resists, which happen of course, and it's up to you whether you need to reset if you just get unlucky with them. And these are really out of your hands, so hopefully you'll have some points into elemental precision to lessen the chance that this happens. Oh, and always have a mana gem ready to go just in case of emergencies. Even if, like me, you aren't into AoE leveling, mages are just good at leveling in general. You can apply the same AoE grinding strats to just your standard kill X or collect X quests as well. The more mobs you're hitting with that AoE, the more efficient it becomes, and just spamming frostbolt can go through your mana bar pretty fast, so do make the most of your AoE capabilities. Fire can be decent for leveling 2 as a choice, it's more reliant on crits however, which you'll basically not have any at all during the leveling phase, and the slows mages have by default can help out a good bit, and fire can put out more damage, but it comes at the expense of actually being able to put out AoE that mages are famous for in favour of more single target. If you do want to give it a go, I would wait until later levels where you can start playing more of an elemental build with a hybrid between frost and fire than starting off as fire. AoE or just taking mobs down one by one, mages have an easier time leveling than most. Dungeons or raids, mages are the best range class you can bring to pretty much any PvE encounter. One of the best things about them is, unlike many other classes, they have an engaging and meaningful rotation that really challenges and makes you think about what you're doing. Right, jokes aside, majority of classes are like this to be fair anyway. This is classic PvE. I think we all know it's more about organisation and optimisation than anything else.
Back on track, what makes mages so good in PvE then? Well, they have a toolkit that really fits everything required of a ranged damage dealer. In dungeons, they have the best crowd control ability in the game, polymorph, enabling you to make certain pulls a lot easier or allowing you to recover far easier. Your slowing or rooting abilities also help a lot in dungeons. No other class can peel for a tank in the way that a mage can, and when the mage invariably takes aggro, playing around your slowing effects means they don't even end up taking any damage themselves if you space correctly. This is why you see dungeon groups that are quite literally 4 mages and a healer. Frostnova into Flamestrike Cone of Cold with Shatter talent would be massive burst on one target, never mind a whole group. Which brings me to my next point, Mage AoE doesn't have restrictions in terms of targets. Some AoE spells do only hit a certain number of targets like Whirlwind or Blade Flurry. All of the AoE that mages can do can hit as many targets as are in their area. So there isn't really a point where there are too many mages, the more the better, which is why many raids will bring many mages. In fact, most raids would probably bring more if it weren't for how little loot drops. In raids, mages are one of the very few classes who actually have a change up in specialization over the course of Classic. Though some of the classes also do so due to hitting different gear levels or stat caps, mages change because, well, raids allow them to eventually. Fire is better damage than Frost due to the crit scaling, as well as Ignite building up on targets leading to some huge damage. However, you can't really play Fire in Molten Core or Blackwing Lair due to many of the bosses being either immune or very resistant to fire. This isn't the case with Frost at all. Fire starts becoming a thing around Zul'Gurub or AQ since the bosses aren't just a bunch of fire elementals anymore. In terms of specializations, you do need one mage with the Winter's Chill talent so that all the other mages can benefit from the extra 10% crit chance of this ability. Also, this specialization is far better for PvP since you're going Deep Frost and you can get Ice Barrier and Ice Block, which are two absolutely essential PvP talents, which we'll talk about more later. So if you don't mind not being the top of the meters, I would go this spec. However, in terms of maximizing damage at the moment, going deep into the arcane tree is the better option for the time being, which sounds a bit weird since you're still considered to be a frost mage. Overall, arcane is more of a support tree to the other specializations. Since fights are currently so short, mages that can benefit from arcane power, the final talent in the arcane tree, are just going to be way ahead. It gives 30% extra damage for 15 seconds. Add a power infusion from a priest on top of this and there's a very easy reason that mages can top the charts. A specialization would look something along this line. On top of this, mages also get a 6% free hit from talents, which is exactly 6% more than Warlocks get, by the way, adding a big difference to the number of spells that actually land, as well as getting a 30% passive reduction to threat via talents. These talents seem like not a big deal, but they really add such a massive amount to a class that is already well equipped to excel. However, as mentioned earlier, fire will take the reins later on. A specialization will look something like this, taking pretty much everything in the fire tree really, including improved Scorch, allowing all mages to enjoy a 15% extra fire damage debuff on their target. Unlike Frost though, this is something that all mages can get, so you don't need to worry about one person showing up with a correct specialization. What makes fire so special is Ignite. This is a 40% damage over time effect when a fire spell crits, making those big hitting fireballs that bit more dangerous. This will also stack the damage over time effect from massive crits from mages, and with some good RNG you can fly ahead of everyone else on the meters. An issue with this specialization, however, is no longer having a threat reduction from talents anymore, and after having played Frost for many months, it's going to come as a bit of a shock just how easily and fast you can pull aggro, so be cautious when you're making the swap over from Frost to Fire. So up to now, it seems like mages are pretty special in how they work, and that very much extends to the ways in which they can farm gold. One of the very interesting things about Classic is how new or old methods have been surpassed, improved upon entirely. Initially, lashes from Diamol East were expected to be the big haul once Diamol came out, but specifically for mages, new techniques have arisen and been made popular. Methods like farming the free Satyr packs in Diamol, using your slows and fishing for clear casting procs with low ranks of Arcane Explosion, then following up with Cone of Cold and Frostnova to keep them out of reach. The very popular method of clearing out the graves in Zul'Farrak, then AoEing down the elites using the similar methods. Basically, if the mobs are only melee range, they don't have higher resistance to frost, and they can be easily gathered into a bunch. There's no real cap on what a mage can farm at once. Melee leeway does make it a little bit more tricky for sure, but it's just something you have to learn to play around, and in fact you do have your own sort of counterplay, since spells gain a little bit more range when you jump, meaning you should make a habit of jumping on your AoE spells to essentially turn on spell batching for a brief moment. So what makes Frost the monster AoE spec? Well, not only do they have multiple tools to freeze enemies, especially especially combined with talents, they also have several recovery techniques. Frost Nova, Cone of Cold, and Blizzard are the big three spells. Permafrost is perhaps the most important talent in the entire Frost tree for AoE farming. An extra 10% on all of your slowing effects and an extra 3 seconds on those effects as well. Without this, the slow on Blizzard would only last for 2 seconds, and one resist could easily mean the pack breaking. Next up, Cone of Cold with Permafrost. You can basically have a 100% uptime on a 70% slow that lasts as long as its cooldown is. Finally, in terms of recovery, you have your Mana Gem, Evocation, Ice Barrier, Ice Block, and of course Cold Snap, resetting all of those cooldowns, including your shorter durations one like Frost Nova and Cone of Cold. Add all this up and mages are pretty untouchable in certain circumstances. No other class can do this, or even come close to doing it for that matter. It's the same principles that make AoE farming when leveling good as it is with generating gold. PvP now. Fax Monkey, Game King, Vertney, ring any bells? Mages were one of the classes that lend themselves best to the montage plays. With a plethora of tools to control massive groups of enemies or a single one, they're one of the best classes in 1v1s and also in groups, and the bigger the group, the better mages become. Mages are the ideal initiator for mass scale fights at key choke points, like trying to get into Blackrock Mountain from either side, the entrance to Diamall, and so on. Since Frost Nova hits every single target, one mage landing one good Nova can win a fight before it starts. Follow this up with a Goblin Sapper charge and some Arcane Explosions for huge AoE. And to top it off, once you get low, you've got a get out of jail free card. You can just Ice Block and sit there until your blinks come back off cooldown and then return to your allies. Against most matchups in 1v1s, you have the upper hand to the point where you're almost expected to win the majority of the time. If anything, duels for mages can fall into two categories: fights where you need to win before you go out of mana, and fights you need to win before you run out of cooldowns. The mana battles are warriors, paladins, and druids, who all have very good defensive options, but either are weak on offense or have trouble actually getting to the mage consistently. In these fights, you need to make sure you aren't wasting mana if you know the enemy still has defensive options. So for example, if a paladin's sitting on 30% health but still has bubble, it may not be the best idea to start spamming Arcane Explosion to try and finish him off. As for other matchups versus another mage, this can go into a mana battle if both are Frostspect due to the amount of cooldowns that will be traded off. Ideally, you want to get rid of barriers before going in for big damage, but due to the nature of the battle, you really need to be the first to force cooldowns. And one of the best ways to do this is a Frost Nova into improved counterspell combo, which all but requires an Ice Block as an answer, as it will be too much damage to just tank face on. Beyond this, the matchup can get very complicated. Just remember, if you get counterspelled on polymorph, you won't be able to blink anymore either. Warlocks are one of the harder matchups for sure. If they have a Fell Hunter and 5 in the tier 1, the matchup becomes much more of an issue, since they always have access to that counterspell effect that is not tied to their actual character, but the pet. Without a Fell Hunter, they'll probably have a Void Walker, which will mean they have about 2,000 more health overall from sacrifice. Do your best to reaction block the Deathcore to prevent both the CC and the heal effect. Priests are another hard matchup, especially Shadow Priests, since they can dispel all your beneficial effects like Ice Barrier or Dampen Magic. The Silence into Mind Blast combo they can do has to be blocked. Even then, it's hard due to their powerful shield coming in every 15 seconds. You can't really spam reset the fight either due to Shadow Word Pain, so you need to try and aim to end it as soon as you can. Rogues are a very high skill matchup, and you can easily do a whole video on this in particular. Practice makes perfect. You're gonna have to lose a few times before you realise how to win, especially versus competent rogues. It largely comes down to a cooldown trade-off. You both have a reset everything button in Cold Snap and Preparation. Don't try and press everything at once. Always have a goal with each spellcast, as you need to trade cooldown for cooldown. Don't try and Frost Nova to get them out of stealth unless you're 100% sure it's gonna hit, and don't try and spam your mana out too much when you think they're close. With hunters, you must close the gap as soon as possible and abuse the dead zone. Once a hunter has you at range, you've more or less lost the fight between Concussive Shot and Viper Sting. Even if you do reach them, you won't have the mana to actually win. Blink in, block the scatter trap and keep them slowed. Abuse your instant cast. If you can get in their face, it should be an easy win. And finally, Shaman, another matchup that can cause issues. Just like Priest, they can remove all your beneficial effects. If they're enhancement, there's no reason they should ever be able to reach you, as they can't ground AoE effects like Frost Nova or Cone of Cold. Elemental can do better. Earthshock and grounding make the matchup kind of annoying as kind of frost resistance totem. Try to block a Chain Lightning, as it will usually be followed up with an Earthshock, which will make them waste a lot of their mana and cooldowns. Play more around instant casts, and remember, if you counterspell them on a lightning spell, it will pretty much lock out everything they can do, so this is your key to go all in. Moving on from PvP now, how about we talk about the other benefit the mages get? Not only are they great in PvE, PvP, Gold farming, well, you can save more gold than other classes as well, and more time too. Ever gone out from your inn when you're questing or farming gold into the world, taken a 15-minute journey to get there, and then you open your bag and with dread realise you forgot food and water? Yeah, I've done this way too many times personally. Well, mages never have that issue. I bet if you're a mage main and you've been leveling an alt, you think that these innkeepers are scamming with the prices since you know you can just get it for free. Okay, well, not entirely free, it costs mana and time, but you know what else takes time? Farming gold that you would have otherwise spent that food and water on that you can make for free. Since Diamor's out, mages have been the provisioner of the best quality water in the game. And many people will pay for a few seconds of your time to make this water when they're out for a session gold farming themselves. It's a very simple quest in Diamor East to get the final rank of Conjure Water. If you don't have it, I would strongly recommend going and grabbing it. You can even do it solo. Just to show you it quickly, we're going to go and talk to Lawkeeper Lydros in Diamor West. Now, you can get to him without having to complete the entirety of Diamor West if you have the Crescent Key by going through Diamor North or waiting till someone opens the door shown here. And then you just go around to the left and open this other door. Once again, if you don't have the key, you'll have to get someone to open this. Talk to him, and he wants you to defeat Hydra Spawn, the first boss in Diamor East, which you can also do solo, by the way. This one might take a few tries if you're a bit new to this, but it shouldn't be too hard overall. And by the way, keep in mind that he is immune to frost damage, and you just want to hop up and down this ledge here until he's down. Return to Lydros, and congrats, that's the best rank of Conjure Water in the game until TBC. You know what else is pretty cool? Being able to teleport. Teleporting saves a whole lot of time and gives you far more flexibility in where you can set your Hearthstone. Not only can you hop between any major city in a few seconds, but you can come out at your class trainers, making it super easy to teleport back, train skills, and then Hearthstone right back to where you were questing or farming. Portals on top of this allow allies to get around too, for a small fee, of course, but even a smaller cost compared to the amount of time it would take to get certain places in the open world, like the absolute trek from Stormwind to Darnassus, for example. Okay, enough on that, let's move on and take a look at a few macros that can come in handy. It's not exactly a macro, but make use of rank 1 frostbolt. With modifications from talents, it becomes a 1 second cast, 50% slow for 8 seconds at 36 yard range, which makes it far easier for you to catch up with your target or maintain distance very quickly at a small mana cost. As mentioned in the Warlock video, a macro so you can spam attack with your wand is very nice. It makes it so your wand's attacks aren't consistently turned on and off each time you press the button. This macro will leave it on with one press, and it can be turned off by spamming another spell or moving. A sequence macro to do your buffs can save a bit of bar space and at the same time can be applied with your Conjure Water and food spells as shown here. Finally, just a mention to mouseover macros that can be useful on some of your spells. I would personally use them on Remove Curse, Polymorph, or Counterspell. It allows you to keep doing what you are doing without having to mess about changing back and forth on targets, so just change the ability around here as necessary. Add-on wise, we more or less want those that I believe are pretty much essential for any caster. There's nothing too exceptional here. OmnicCC shows the length of CCs, and it will also display if you landed a successful interrupt on the target and the length of the lockout as well. Very useful. ClassicAuraDurations displays the length of time a debuff will exist on an enemy target. Very good for allowing you to know when you need to refresh your slowing effects if you are out in the world gold farming. I would get details as well and tiny threat so you can see a bit more in detail how close you are to tanks on threat. Mages do a lot of damage. You don't want to be over aggroing, especially if you aren't running ice block. Finally, ClassicCastBars allows you to see what others are casting to give you a better idea of when you need to fire that counter spell off, as well as just being very useful in general. And that's the Mage video. I expected this one to be pretty long. This class is amazing overall, and it's top tier for a very good set of reasons. And it's also the end of this series. It's been very interesting to look through everything in a little bit more detail. Playing alongside or even seeing some of these classes myself does go a huge way to change perspective on how I see them. And as mentioned a few times, classes are my key interest in Classic and the game going forwards, whatever that may be. And I do like seeing exactly what everyone is capable of doing. I do have some ideas for the future, perhaps looking into getting started at level cap regards to PvE, gear options, talents, gameplay and so on. That could be something interesting moving forwards. You can let me know what you think about that. As always, I do hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one.
If you like what you see, give the video a like and subscribe as there's plenty more to come. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Take care. Bye.